Okay, so for the sake of the recording, this is Friday, July 29th. So this is week 4 of our music theory boot camp. And now we're talking about Roman numerals. And this, if you felt like the rubber met the road last week or the week before, you're for sure gonna feel it this week, in addition, because this is practical application of the things that we've been doing in class. So just as a really quick review, this is actually our practice on progressions. So this is the very last thing in the module, okay, for this week. By the way, there was an issue. I was in a rush and did the announcements on my phone this week. So I think some of them didn't pop up in time, but I hopefully fixed it and you guys saw them. So by Wednesday, it was fine, but Monday and Tuesday might have been a little bit funky. Just so you know. So if you missed those announcements, feel free to go back, make sure that, everything's clear. But anyway, the thing about progressions is that this is only part of what the unit was. The unit really started with identifying Roman numerals. And if I were to go ahead and do a quick staff up here, and we threw up a scale, what key are we in here for our little progression down?
I'm going to the things for this week practice.
It's in the practice. So we're basically in C major. So let's just stick to C major for the time being, right? So here we go. If I drew a scale and I go up the scale like this, and this was in one of the extra videos. So, again, if you missed the announcement, go ahead and go back to it. But what we can do is we associate, or not even associate yet, we can just label the scale degrees, right? So this is scale degree 1, scale degree 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. Now, 1 and 8 are the same. So a lot of times we just kind of skip back to 1. We don't really say 8. Okay. So we've got scale degrees 1 through 7. And as you're reading, like if you have any textbooks on music theory, reading through the units, sometimes they have these little hats. That's the symbol for scale degree. Okay, so it's just a scale degree. And what we do is we associate now function with the scale degree. Now, what's function? Function is where you take your Roman numeral and you give it a label. Okay, so this is Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We kind of go back to 1. Okay, so just like we did for the scale degrees. So in putting these labels on, basically what we're doing is we're assigning function. Okay, Roman numerals always relate to the root of a chord. Okay, Roman numeral root. So I'm going to do this in a different color because it's going to go right over top of these numbers. But if we have a 1 chord, okay, that is a major chord, C, E, G. So my capital Roman numeral indicates a major triad above that root note, okay? And then same thing with DFA. This is a minor triad, right? So we have a little 2. It's built on the 2nd scale degree. And so the Roman numeral is lowercase. Same thing here, okay, with the 3. E, G, and B is a minor triad. F, A, and C is major, so it's capital 4. G, B, D is major, capital 5. A, C, and E is minor. Okay, this is actually the relative minor, right? So it's a very common place to modulate. And that is little 6, right? Lowercase 6. 7 is a bit weird because if we stack up B, D, and F, we actually get a diminished triad. There are 2 minor thirds here, one on top of the other. That's the only time it happens diatonically, meaning that it's just part of the regular scale. We don't have to add any accidentals into it. And that's the only time that happens. So it's the 7th scale degree. And for that reason, the chord that's built on the 7th scale degree the leading tone chord, is treated in a very special way. Okay. So, so we're not going to see these very often. And when we do see them, they're going to be in the first inversion, because the tritone that goes between the root and the fifth is a really strident interval. And so in order to kind of downplay that, we put the third in the bass, because we hear the bass a little bit more readily than other notes and chords sometimes. And then, of course, we get back to our tonic, and it's exactly like it is the lower octave. Okay, so so now this stuff that's in blue down here, the Roman numerals, you can pretty much just memorize that. This is applicable to any major key, okay, as long as they are diatonic chords, meaning we don't have any accidentals. It's applicable to any major key. And sometimes, like on the AP music theory exams, what I'll see people do, in the margin of their test, which is a good idea, is, they write this down. They just memorize this. Okay. And then they take whatever key they're in and write themselves basically the chords that belong, or the chord notes, right? The members that belong to that key. So for example, if we were in the key of F major, right? This would be F, A, C. This would be G, B flat, D. This would be A, C, E. Didn't one right. This would be B flat. You get the picture, right? C, E, G. D. E natural, which is kind of an interesting little spacing out here. There. Build. So notice that we do have the B flat accidental here, but it's diatonic. It's already part of that F major key. So it's considered, like I said, diatonic, and we don't have any further alterations there. And so this is kind of their little matrix, okay, on chord structure and how to identify chords, and how to build chords, because that's, those are a couple of tasks that we need to do on the AP Music Theory exam. So anyway, like I said, the Roman numerals can be applied to absolutely any chord that, any key, I should say. And there's one other diatonic chord that we should talk about, and that's the 5-7. It is a major minor chord. So you remember that from the last module, right? When we're talking about chord quality with sevenths, that means that it's a major triad and a minor seventh. This is the only, come on, writer. There we go. This is the only diatonic chordal seventh that we have that is major minor. Okay. Any other diatonic chordal seventh is going to be minor minor or major major. So, or in the case of the leading tone, we might have a half diminished or fully diminished, depending on whether we are in a major key or a minor key. But anyway, yes. So the 5 chord is very special for that reason. And we even have it here, the B flat. All right. So sometimes we see a 5-7. That's very common. Okay. It's a C. As far as 7th chords go, trying to think. I think we can maybe go ahead and start analyzing some of this. And then as we get into it, we can maybe talk about, how we came to different parts of it. As we're analyzing, don't forget that we are going to run into inversions. Okay. And so we'll walk through basically how to identify the root of the chord, meaning we're stacking everything line, 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 or space, space, space. And then how to kind of compare that root position triad, which gives us the Roman numeral, to the given position, which gives us the figured bass symbol. Okay. Oh, there's one other thing in the unit now that I think about it before we do that. Let's just talk really quickly about that. These chords each have names based on their function. Okay. So we talked about this one already on the 5 is called the dominant, right? The tonic is another really common one to talk about, tonic. And then tonic and dominant kind of pull against each other. Okay. So what we have in the unit, and I'm going to draw it over here where I have a little bit extra room. Let me move, move this box. Nope, that isn't going to work. I need my mouse. There we go. Okay, there we go. I'm walking myself through this. Okay, there we go. So tonic and dominant are polar opposites, really. Okay, the dominant always pulls to the tonic. So we're not going to expect to see a dominant until right before the end, and then we get to our tonic, unless we're coming to what we call a half cadence. Okay, that means that we're only halfway through our phrase, or we maybe have an antecedent consequent phrase that we need to kind of do a question and answer to. So let's imagine that we have the sun, okay, in our universe here. And the sun is our tonic. Everything pulls to the tonic. The stuff that's going to pull in that first orbit, okay, is going to be the 5. And then sometimes the 7 will act like a 5, okay, usually in first inversion, right? And this could even be a 7-7, right? But it's still in first inversion. So those are the chords that contain our leading tone, right? Here's a leading tone. Here's a leading tone. They are the ones that pull the strongest, okay? Here in the next orbit is what we call the predominant. So we've got tonic, dominant, predominant chords would be 4. And then also our supertonic, which is 2. Okay, that usually carries with it a predominant function. Again, often 2 is in first inversion because of that predominant function. So here's predominant there, and here's the B flat there again. Okay. So we've covered a bunch of these already. What falls into the next couple categories are basically what we call passing chords. Okay, so passing chords would be the 6, okay, and the 3. Now, 3 is not used very frequently at all. It's a very unstable kind of chord. It sounds minor. It also contains the leading tone. It's very confusing to the ear. So 3 is just, it's only used honestly in patterns. So like the circle of fifths progression that we talked about in this unit, we're going to see a 3 in there because it's a cycle of falling fifths, but it's otherwise not really a popular chord. Okay. And it shouldn't be a first option. The 6, gets used fairly frequently as a passing chord. And then another really common passing chord is a 1-6. Notice the 1-6 and the 3, we'll do boxes on this one. Okay. Have the same bass note. So in that situation, if you see an A in the bass, well, in the key of F major, if you see the 3rd basically in the bass, the median in the bass, then look for a 1-6 because it's very frequently a 1-6 instead of a 3. Okay, so completing our picture here, we have tonic, supertonic, median, subdominant, dominant. Submediant is the term for the 6, which I know is a little bit weird, but it is related to the 3. So we've got submediant, the leading tone, and then the tonic. If you are in minor, everything stays the same, except the leading tone in a natural minor mode is called the subdominant because there's a half step for the leading tone, right? In the natural minor, we don't have a leading tone. We have a whole step between the 7th scale degree and the dominant, and the tonic. So that is a subdominant, I'm really confusing everyone, aren't I? Is a subtonic rather than a leading tone. Okay, so if you see a half step, leading tone, you see a whole step, subtonic. Okay, let's clear this out for a minute because this looks really confusing, right? And go ahead and do the progression. And I think it will become clearer as we use some of these terms and as we use some of this information. So we said we're in C major. Okay. And I will give you a hint. Looking at the very last chord, okay, you see this G in the bass? G, B, got another G, and we have a D, stacking that in root position. We see that G is on the bottom, and G in the key of C major is a 5. So we are actually ending not on C. This is a half cadence. This is just a half, there we go. Sorry. Okay. This is just a half cadence and does not warrant, well, it warrants another phrase. We just don't have it here. This is just our little practice is just this, first half of the phrase. Okay. So let's go ahead and analyze a little, and I'll talk through a little bit of it. And then if you have questions at the end, we'll go back through just because there are a couple of steps to this. So any chord needs to first be put in root position, right? Now, I like to do this on the staff. Okay, I've got a C there. I have a C. I don't repeat it in the octave. I just keep it on the staff where I had it. So all the octaves reduced down to just one note. We have E, and then we have G up above. Okay, in the key of C major, C, E, and G is a 1 chord, right? So we can kind of do that. And if you want to, remember how we did this earlier, if that helps to have a matrix up here of, the different chords and what their chord members are, that's easy enough to do. So C, E, G, D, F, A, E, G, B, F, F, A, C, G, B, D. And why don't we also just, for the sake of argument, add the 7th up there in case we see that. A, C, and E, and then the 7th is B, D, and F. There we go. Okay, so that corresponds with our 1, and we put our Roman numeral 1 down here. Moving on, so we do the next chord. We have a C, there's a C. We have an E, there's an E. We have a C. Well, we don't have a G here, but we do have a rule that, if we have the root and the third, we can assume that, first of all, we are in root position, which we are. You're not supposed to do this if you have inversions, so root position. And we can assume that the 5th, if it were present, the 5th would be perfect. Okay, so we're assuming that our 5th here, would be a perfect 5th. And if that's the case, we already have in the instructions to ignore the 8th notes because these are things called non-chord tones. So we're just not going to worry about the 8ths right now. That chord on the beat is another 1 chord. So we'll go ahead and repeat the Roman numeral, skip the 8th notes. That's a totally different theory class. Is talking about non-chord tones. The second beat, we can do the same analysis, but make sure we put it in root position. So here's our E, here's a C, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that they're stacked space, space, space. Okay. Here's a G present in this chord, and notice we have an inversion, so it has to be present. And then the C we already have accounted for in the bass. So we've got E, C, G, and C. Same chord members as the tonic, right? So we're going to go ahead and put the Roman numeral, but we have more to add here because we have an inversion, right? So in this case, the inversion looks like the 3rd is in the bass. When we have the 3rd in the bass, it's a first inversion triad, and we know that we can put the 6 there. Remember, there are actually figures that go along with all of these Roman numerals. We just don't always put them in because it muddies the water, right? So our inversion symbols here would be 5, 3. And that's just a kind of an understood, right? That we're in root position, 5, 3 here, root position, understood. And then same thing here, we've had a 3rd that is understood, that we don't write. Okay. If it helps you at first to just write those in so you don't forget about the figures, about the Arabic numerals, that's fine. Just remember that figured bass always indicates the interval above the bass. So even if you were totally lost on this and were like, I have no idea what the inversion is, you know that it's a 1 chord. You could look at the intervals above the bass. So E up to C is the 6th, E up to G is the 3rd, and then E up to C is another 6th. So we got a 6 and a 3, right? And then that's where you have your inversion symbols. Okay, let's go to the next one. So we've got F, we've got C, and that's already on a line, so I'm going to leave that there. We've got A, there we have them line, line, line. Oh, and we have D. Ooh, we have a 7th chord. And that's okay. 7ths happen on the 2nd scale degree, which is what we have on D, F, and A. And we do have diatonic 7ths. It just happens that this one, like I said, is either going to be major, major, or minor, minor. And this one happens to be minor, minor. Okay, so this one's D, F, and A is minor. And then the D to the C is minor as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this is 2. Okay, minor triad. And it's a minor 7th, but it's diatonic. So we don't need any other adiastomatic symbols. We don't need little degree signs or anything like that. So we're just going to do a minor 2. And then again, we've got the 3rd in the bass here, right? That's that. Now, the 3rd being in the bass, we're going to have and it being a 7th chord, we're going to have an extra number, right? An extra interval to account for. And so the first inversion of a 7th is a 6, 5. Okay. And again, we can count that up from the bass. So F up to C is the 5th, and F up to A is the 3rd, and then F up to D is the 6th. Okay. So we have a 6, 5, and a 3 that we don't need to say. All right. Moving on to the next one. We've got G, we've got B, we've got another G, and then we have a D. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this to keep everything on spaces. Okay. Or I can compare it to my matrix, G, B, and D. Okay. We know it's a 5 chord because it corresponds up there. We have a major triad. All of that is, hopefully getting to be kind of old hat now, and kind of get in the groove of identifying these. And our root is the bass. So we don't have any other symbols to add. It's a 5-3, and we don't need to say that. All right, we are going to ignore the 8ths, remember. So we're just looking at the first beat here of this particular chord. So we've got a C, we've got another C, we have a G, and we have an E. C is in the bass and is the root. It's a 1 chord, no other symbols needed. Okay, and then we already did the 1. Sorry, not the 1, the 5 at the end. So that was the half cadence. So now that we've done that, we've talked about Roman numerals, we talked about the function of the chords, and that we're probably not going to see the 5 until the end. We start with a 1, and then we've got this kind of passing motion in between till we get to a predominant and then a dominant. What is your question? Does anybody have any questions?
I was wondering how you were able to find the like bass note of the chord in each of them.
Got it.
And how you'd be able to identify whether it would be an inversion or just the bass note is that
is the root, right? So here's the thing. I love this little matrix up here, right? I think it's a really nice way to like identify the chord members, and then you kind of plug in the Roman numeral. But what you're talking about is really why I put these little tick marks, these little notes on the stuff, because I can compare it easily to the given chord. So for example, let's look at this one right here. Okay, because that was in an inversion. So I'm comparing my stacked chord, right? We said this had a C, E, and a G in it, right? And then here, let me erase this stuff here so we can see better. And then our given chord has E, okay? The root never changes. So our stacked chord in root position is always going to be root, third, fifth. Always, 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 right? Because we're just stacking them line, 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 space, 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 like a triad, okay, in thirds. When we compare that to the given chord, the given chord's lowest note is always the bass. Okay, so the bass could be the root, like we have in root position chords, or it could be the third, or it could be the fifth. And we haven't had any second inversion chords here, but they do happen. Okay, so what we get, my 3-year-old needs me apparently. Anyway, so what we get here is the bass as the third of the chord, rather than like say one of these ones where the bass is the root of the chord. So that's really what we're doing, is we're comparing a given chord in the progression with a stacked chord that we create as a root position triad to compare. Sometimes they're the same, you know, in terms of the bass and the root. And sometimes we have an inversion. So the bass could be the third, or the bass could be the fifth, or the bass could be the seventh if you're in a seventh chord. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And then also why in the last one that we did with the just with the I, why didn't you, how come you didn't write 5-3, but on the first one you wrote 5-3?
So good question. So 5-3, in fact, that's why it's in a different color and a different, you know, in parentheses here. I could actually erase all of that pink stuff. And this is a complete analysis. So there's no need to write the 5-3 when we have a root position chord. And these chords, these ones, are all root position chords. In fact, it's the same thing with the dominant chords. Oops. Come on, there. Okay, so they're all the same in terms of their position. And the 5-3 are the figures that over time we have decided don't really need to be there. It's like, I don't know if you guys have pets at home. We have dogs. If it, you know, if I'm training my dog, I don't say, hey, you sit down. You know, I just say sit, right? Sit is a complete sentence. It looks like only a verb, but the subject is you and it's understood. And we don't say you, we understand that it's there, right? It's the same thing with our 5-3. We understand as a music analyst, you know, we understand when we look at it that if there's nothing next to the Roman numeral, it's root position, and root position is always 5-3, right? It just gets to be a little superfluous if we keep writing 5-3, 5-3, 5-3, 5-3, and it looks a little bit confusing when we keep writing them over and over and over. So just like under the 6 here, there's a third in that stack, but it's that third is present in the root position triad also. So we don't need to write the 3. We just write the 6. That gives us enough information. This developed this kind of shorthand of not needing the root position indication, developed back in the 17th and 18th centuries when we had keyboard writing. Okay, so for example, like Bach used this, Handel used this, Vivaldi used this, and even earlier than them, you know, Ottiter used this, Murray used this. We had a shortage of a lot of things. We didn't have paper readily available all the time. You know, it was expensive. It was available, but it was expensive. We didn't have loads and loads of ink. It was also expensive, right? You didn't have as many daylight hours, right? We're a little bit spoiled right now because, you know, it's like daylight until like 9 p.m. or something right now, right? In the summer. But imagine being in northern Germany, which is pretty far north, as far as kind of latitude goes on the earth. It's pretty far north. And imagine it gets dark at 3 p.m. in the wintertime. So then you're working by candlelight if you can afford candles, right? So there were a lot of necessities to take shortcuts and get music written. I should say, be as prolific as your music writing needed to be, get the work done, but with fewer resources and less time. And so instead of writing all of the chords out in an accompaniment, what you would see, let's just say this is your bass line, you would see this right? You would see whatever rhythms you wanted on here. And you would maybe see nothing under this note. You'd see a 6 under that note, nothing under this note, maybe a 6/4, and then a 7, and then a 1. So those numbers would be all you would see, as opposed to writing this. See how it's a lot, there's just a lot more. So this is what we call figured bass. And figured bass is literally just telling the performer what the intervals above that given bass note would be. And the performer then would have to fill out the rest of the chord. Okay. And it's really difficult to do. I took a class in this when I was in England, and my brain just, it took me a long time to there are all these rules you have to remember as far as voicing and what can and can't be doubled, and how high can you go above your soloist voice, and all this stuff. And it's very confusing. So it took some practice, but performers were trained to read just what's in green, so that it wasn't an issue trying to write out all of the figures above the bass note. So that's really why we don't write the 5/3s, because it was born out of necessity and has become shorthand kind of parlance in music writing. So, and if you pick up any music theory textbooks or talk about this with your private teachers, that it may or may not be something that you use often with your instrument. So like flutists don't use figured bass very often. It's nice to know, because if I'm playing an haute terre suite and I'm playing the top line, I need to know what my accompanist or what my duo partner is doing underneath me. And these little green numbers are my clue in terms of their chords. And so then I can go off of that when I'm doing any ornamentation. When I'm creating my ornamentation, I know what chord is being played. And if I want to do neighbor notes, or if I want to arpeggiate that chord, I know what the notes are going to be. So it's important to know, but I don't regularly read off of it to perform. You see what I mean? So it depends on your instrument. Guitarists have a completely different thing going for them with tablature. So learning how to read tab is a whole other art form, right? And so it's similar in that way. It's kind of the what do you want to call it? Maybe the syntax of our musical language, trying to figure that out. Okay, any other questions about this?
No.
It's quite a lot. Like I said, this is boot camp, right? This is quite a lot. So what my suggestion would be is to go ahead and go back through, especially this week, if you missed an announcement or whatever at the beginning of the week. Go back through and take some time practicing these things so that you kind of get used to doing them. And music theory is a skills-based practice. It's a skills-based course. So the more you actually practice it, just like practicing your instrument, the more you are likely to be successful, at it later. Beyond this is the last practice for the last unit. And beyond this is, oops, click on it. There we go. Is our Bach Chorale analysis. Now, this is our one and only assignment in the boot camp class and in terms of assignments to turn in. So I give you some information here with this. This is exactly the same kind of analysis that we just did in the previous exercise. So it's Roman numeral analysis. Don't forget your figures when you need to put in Arabic numerals for your intervals above the bass. Okay. So it is the key of G minor. Okay. Identify the chords on the beat. So that means that this little guy right here is a non-chord tone. So you do not count that note, but all the other chords are in there. And make sure, you put down your inversion symbols. I say to scan and upload the completed assignment. If you have a way to do like I'm doing here, where you're writing on the screen, I don't know if you guys have Photoshop, or even if you had a Zoom account of your own, or Google Classroom or something like that, where you have a chance to write, you can do this online without having any, like print scan type of things, going on. If you would rather, the other thing that you can do is when you're uploading your assignment, you can just write in the text box what the Roman numerals are. So you could just say, 1, 1, 5, 6, blah, 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 blah. You basically have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chords. So scanning it is great if you can print and write on it and scan it, and that's fine. Or you could just go ahead and do the chords themselves. And like I said, there's only 6 chords, and just type them in, send it off, and then I can send you your course completion certificate so that you have that. Any questions about this? No, we're good. Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me again this summer. This was really fun. I always enjoy this class. It's fast. It moves really fast. But I feel like it kind of, gives you a good taste of a broad spectrum of what you do in music theory when you're first starting in music theory. So keep practicing, and I'm going to leave the course open basically from now until, our school year starts in September. So feel free to email me questions, or, send your assignment, and then I'll get those certificates out, and just let me know how things are going. And I will absolutely keep you updated if we end up doing a new course this year, Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.